So, depending on your perspective, today might actually be a very exciting day for Metroid because we might be getting a bit of a hint to Metroid Prime 4 Beyond's release window, and it's not thanks to any news or information specifically about Metroid. It's actually thanks to news around a completely different game and a completely different franchise. But of course, that won't stop me from finding a way to talk about Metroid whenever I can, because that is what I am put on YouTube to do for you guys, and also for me as a super gigantic Metroid fan. So, what we're actually talking about is the release date confirmation for the new Pokemon game, Pokemon AZ, or Pokemon Legends AZ, which got the release date this morning of October 16th. And so you guys are going to laugh and probably find this funny, especially if you're not really familiar with me and my gaming tastes, but this information, this confirmation about the October date for Pokemon AZ is actually how I found out that there was no other date. I mean, in my head, I kind of thought that it was like a nebulous November time and that maybe the date was out there and I just wasn't familiar with it. And I've referenced it in prior videos. But then I saw this information. They said October 16th is the day for the new Pokemon game. And I saw other Pokemon fans and people following it, very excited to finally have that confirmation. And so that kind of was my light bulb moment of like, oh, I guess there really wasn't a date until today. So it's extremely helpful to know that because, like I said, knowing that October has this massive title, because Pokemon games sell like crazy. Doesn't matter what you think of their quality. I myself am not a Pokemon player, so I have no real opinion on that. But I know the quality is constantly divisive amongst Pokemon fans. But regardless of that, the game is going to sell like 15 or 20 million copies. So Nintendo's biggest game for the holiday right now will be Pokemon. It's coming out in the month of October. But now we get to wonder about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, because until Nintendo tells us otherwise, Metroid is still supposed to be a 2025 release. The Switch 2 comes out next week. We've got Mario Kart next week. We have Donkey Kong in July. So what's happening with Metroid Prime 4? I feel like now we can remove October from the table. So the big question becomes, how much more into focus does Metroid Prime 4's release date become? And I would say fairly significantly, because I feel like with October off of the table, it's either going to be September or maybe even November for Metroid Prime 4. And I get it. A lot of people who are not diehard Metroid fans, or people maybe not paying attention to how things are building up to Metroid Prime 4, might say that Nintendo would never make Metroid like their big November game. And I get that people feel that way. However, I think we're entering a new era for Metroid. I think the release of the Switch 2 absolutely changes things and changes how Nintendo views maybe how they plan out their holiday slate. And with this game finally coming after 8 years of waiting and mystery and the development hell that went behind it and everything leading up to it, the popularity of Metroid Dread, I think that November is a time that Nintendo would consider for this game. However, September or maybe even August also makes sense for a few reasons, although we start to get into a really tricky scenario with how much time between the reveal of the release date and the release of the game Nintendo might actually have, so it becomes trickier. But I do think even as early as August is on the table. Now, part of the reason I say that is because it's actually more common for Metroid games to release in the August or September timeframe. Anyway, I believe the first Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime 2, at least in North America, are probably the only times that a Metroid game has released in November. I'm just pulling this off of memory, guys, so forgive me if I'm wrong and you check Wikipedia and I get this wrong. But I'm pretty sure that that's the case. I know that Metroid Prime 2 was November, and I think Metroid Prime 1 was also. However, Metroid Other M and Metroid Prime 3, I believe, were both released in August of their respective years. And then Metroid Samus Returns, that was released in September. And now I know we can also look at Metroid Dread, and that one's tricky because Metroid Dread itself released in October just a few years ago for the Nintendo Switch. But again, with Pokemon releasing in October, and also, by the way, in the dead middle of October as well, I feel like Nintendo knows not to release their other premier game for this year, Metroid Prime 4, within the 2 weeks of Pokemon, in the beginning of October or the end of October. So Metroid Dread might have been an October game, but I feel like we know that that's not going to happen for Metroid Prime 4. And so this really boils down to 3 months as far as I'm concerned. August, September, or November. And, you know, they've done big games in December before. Xenoblade games have released in December. Smash Brothers Ultimate, people sometimes forget, also released in December. So, I don't know. Maybe I am kind of thinking that even December might be a time to release Metroid Prime 4. Wouldn't it be weird for that to feel like a Christmas kind of like holiday winter game? You know, and I know that when you're looking at November, you're looking at, you know, Thanksgiving. And again, talking North America here, you're looking at Thanksgiving and you're still looking at the snowy months and holidays and Christmas lights are up and Christmas trees and all that stuff. So I guess November and December kind of feel the same in a way. And November would also make it before Black Friday for the shopping season. So it gets a little tricky. Ultimately, we're removing October. I think we could see it as early as August or as late as December. And, you know, like I laid out here, you look at some prior Metroid games, August and September have been traditionally very common, popular months for Metroid games to release, right? Metroid Prime 3, Metroid Other M, Metroid Samus Returns. It absolutely happens regularly. So, as much as I want to think November because of Black Friday, I kind of start to lean a little bit more towards August or September, which is exciting because that would mean the game would release even earlier. Now, we also have to factor in how and when Nintendo would reveal the date for the game and if they planned on some kind of a mini Metroid-focused direct presentation or an overview trailer kind of thing. Because they do that for a lot of their games now. They did a direct specifically for Mario Kart World. And I would like to think, and maybe this is me being optimistic, I would like to think Nintendo is going to do, you know, a short little 10-minute direct for Donkey Kong and a short little 10-minute direct for Metroid Prime 4. Why wouldn't they do that? I mean, those games will not be anywhere near as big as Mario Kart, of course, but they're the first 3 big first-party games coming out for the Switch 2 in the Switch 2 era, even though Metroid Prime 4 is cross-gen. And so I just kind of am going to go on the hope and desire that we're going to get a Metroid Prime 4 specific little 10-minute direct presentation, right? So when will they release the date, though? That's the big thing. They got to give us the date before we can understand the actual release of it. And as I theorized in my last video, I think that we might get the first direct presentation from Nintendo in the month of June, a few weeks after the console itself even launches, which actually is reminding me another big piece of news that came out this morning is that Nintendo, for the first time ever, will be joining the Summer Games Fest. Now, this is also tricky because Summer Game Fest happens next week on Friday, June 6th, like the day after the Switch 2 comes out. So I don't know if Nintendo is planning to make big reveals and announcements and make a big splash with Switch 2 stuff the day after the console launches, or if they're just planning to be present to showcase the Switch 2. It's now on the market. We just released it yesterday. Mario Kart World, we just released it yesterday. And also, you know, they've been previewing Donkey Kong Bonanza, so I'm sure that they'll be able to talk about Donkey Kong quite a bit because that game comes out only a month later. And look, I mean, honestly, Metroid Prime 4 will probably also be there. Basically, I could see them attending in a way to kind of repeat a lot of what they did in their April Direct, where they're going to focus on Mario Kart and Donkey Kong and Metroid Prime 4 in terms of showing new gameplay and talking about features and whatnot. But would they make any big announcements only the day after the Switch 2, or would they want to wait until they have their own Nintendo Direct presentation where they control the messaging, which is more common for Nintendo? Tough to say. Maybe they shock us, and the day after the Switch 2 releases, they show us just some more gameplay footage of Metroid Prime 4 at Summer Games Fest, and maybe they actually do give us the date at Summer Games Fest. So, gosh, man, things start to feel really crazy when you start looking at all the options. So, I'll say it this way. I'll summarize it to say this. In June, whether it's at Summer Games Fest, whether it's in a direct near the end of the month, I want to believe in the month of June, they'll give us the date for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. And in June, you're only looking at, I guess, 2 months or so if you look at August, or 3 months if you look at September. I feel like that's a short window of time, but considering the fact that we've already seen gameplay footage of Metroid Prime 4, it was actually re-revealed a year ago, you know, in literally a year ago in June of 2024. So I feel like the release date timing, it's okay for that to be a short window of time as opposed to like revealing the game with only 2 months to go, right? So there's revealing the game and there's giving the release date. And so I want to believe in June they'll give us the date. Even if it's November, that's fine, because I do think that in the Switch 2 era and in this new renaissance period of Metroid, one of the ways you help change the fortunes of a series like Metroid and make it worthy of being a tentpole title is by giving it those chances and putting it in those major slots and putting the spotlight on it. So people will say Metroid's not big enough to support the big November Black Friday title. I say putting Metroid in the big November Black Friday spotlight is how you help make it worthy of that and build its reputation and put more eyes on it. Even though it's a legendary franchise that goes back to the 80s and the NES, it is a series that doesn't sell like, Zelda and Pokemon and Mario Kart. So this could be the way Nintendo is going to try to change their fortunes, is by making it the November title, right? So this is all a very long way for me to say that I don't really have a hard prediction for the month, but losing October, removing October because of Pokemon's release date, to me, has my sights focused on August, September, or November, with a slight caveat of December. Maybe they do something crazy and make it like a Christmas winter game, which would be, again, very interesting and not impossible. Time will tell. August and September feels more consistent with previous Metroid games. November would really show confidence in what Nintendo is doing with Metroid and the fact that they believe it's worthy of being a November game, as opposed to Pokemon. Because that's the thing, is I think most people were probably predicting Pokemon would be the November game. In my head, as somebody who hasn't been following, like I said in the beginning here, I kind of just thought it was November, only to find out that they announced today that it's October 16th. So suddenly November is free, and maybe they announce a new Mario game that becomes a November game, so obviously that makes a lot more sense. But in the here and now, before we've seen a new Mario game confirmed and Metroid is the only outlying game without a release date, that's why I think November makes sense, even though September or August also makes sense. So, man, really hard to nail it down if you can't tell. I'm kind of all over the place with my thoughts here, but it's just exciting to be able to focus a little bit more on when we can expect it because of Pokemon's release date being confirmed. So, I think these are all my thoughts. Share your own below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.